So, what can you see right now?
I can see like a zoomed in version that existed for thousands of years. Yeah. Not the whole, I can't see the whole screen, I don't think,
Yeah, it
because I
just
can't see the play button.
okay, but you don't need to see the play button though. So let's see. Let's see what this looks like.
Years of
Can
a
you hear
hidden
that?
underground
Yep,
kingdom
I can hear
known
it.
as Shambhala.
Okay, let's start it over.
Okay.
Another episode of Replay and Review. It's your boy Nos, my guy Femi,
We here.
down there on the border making it happen. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Cartel. We back talking about Hollow Earth. We did a sneak peek last episode. We were having some technical difficulties, but we back strong now. Let's get to it. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
So I guess we're going to introduce more research. I think that this is going to be a great video because this blends really well with what Kinos was talking about. Was talking about how the Roriks, basically were able to get so many, garner a lot of attention. And I think that this guy does a great job of reiterating some of those points and really letting you know that Kinos knows what the fuck he's talking about with the research that he's done so far. So I'm excited to jump into this and to get a more colorful view.
Facts. And shout out to the YouTubers. Just let y'all know what my boy just said is facts. Everything I know is before I saw this video. So shout out to my expertise.
Yeah, I actually introduced him to this video. He hasn't seen this video before. So like these are all two independent researchers, ended up with the same information. So that needs to be said, I feel like, you know what I'm saying?
Facts. And shout out Mr. Mythos. We'll tag you in our post. Get you some more subscribers, share the knowledge, and here we go.
This investigation is sponsored by Skillshare. In the 1920s, Nicholas and Helena Roerich, a mystic husband and wife, took a journey deep into the Tibetan Himalayas under the funding of American sponsors, the true purpose of which remains up for debate. However, there is a legend in Tibet that has existed for thousands of years of a hidden underground kingdom known as Shambhala. Shambhala has played a role in nearly every Tibetan tradition, and surrounding geographic regions such as Mongolia, India, and China have direct mythological parallels to this inner earth civilization of technologically and spiritually advanced, godlike people. The Roerichs, Russian expatriates funded by the Americans, were serious believers in the legend of Shambhala. During their 5-year expedition, they disappeared somewhere in the Himalayas for more than 12 months. No one is sure what the Roerich time, with only sparse journal entries describing a sighting of a flying saucer and the receival of some magical stone, among other bizarre events most would label as fantasy. Though their expedition was publicly labeled a failure, it's likely that wasn't true at all, because in 1933, the office of the US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt funded a second expedition in which they again completely disappeared for 3 months in the Himalayas.
Okay, let me pause it right there for me. We talked about a lot of these things. We didn't actually see any info about them seeing a flying saucer, so that's kind of interesting that there's some information out there. It's not surprising really, but that's something I'd never heard. But just to speak about what we were speaking about before, just the simple fact that leaders of states, the most powerful the most powerful position on the planet, supposedly, as far as the government goes, the U.S. president would double down on such an expedition. And back to my point, I used to, that I've told you before, it's like when it comes to conspiracy, back in those days, I mean, not to say that there was no such thing as a conspiracy, but it's not what it is today, as far as like the hoopla surrounding it and kind of people feeling like everything is fantasy. These were legitimate people, as we discussed about the Roerichs. They were essentially like Russian socialites. So the fact that you have these Russian socialites and you have the president of the United States sponsoring them to go hunting for essentially inner Earth civilization. I mean, to me, that's a very profound thing. And not only that, look at what time period it was. I mean, this is, you're talking about they're looking for a technologically advanced civilization. They're not looking for it in 2022. They were looking for it back in the early 1900s. You know what I'm saying?
So, real early. We're talking like 1930s, 1920s.
Yeah, we're talking about, a period of time where, you
Fake
know,
news wasn't out there, and
yeah,
like people
yeah,
ain't even know about any inner Earth, nothing. You know what I'm saying?
right, right. I mean, you're talking about maybe being on the brink of like the Industrial Revolution or something like that.
Right.
But like, as far as technology, there was really none. It was almost still, at a caveman level to some degree. So it's interesting that, those facts are interesting. Let's continue.
I'm Mr. Mythos, and I'll be your guide to the Rourke search for Shambhala. Shambhala has been called by many names in different cultures, the most famous being Agartha. In fact, Shambhala is often said to be Agartha's capital city, Agartha being an extensive subterranean network of advanced civilizations that escaped some cataclysm thousands of years ago. I previously investigated the legend of Agartha in detail, and I'll leave a link to that video at the end. The most ancient Hindu and Buddhist scriptures speak of Shambhala as if it actually exists. It has a specified lineage of 32 rulers, a population of at least 20,000 when the city was built, and a geopolitical history recorded in the ancient Buddhist text, the Kalachakra Tantra. Moreover, it's believed the same civilization was described by the pre-Buddhist religion of Tibet, known as Bon, which states the entrance as being west of Mount Kailash. Despite most Buddhists today asserting that Shambhala exists in a purely spiritual dimension, it's clear that in many early traditions, Shambhala was believed to be physically accessible. It's only a matter of finding the hidden kingdom in one of the most uncharted and extreme regions in the world, the Himalayan mountains. Undoubtedly, the only people equipped for such a dangerous and esoteric mission were Nicholas and Helena Rourke, two of the greatest mystics to have ever lived.
Let me pause it for a second, Femi. You know what I just thought about?
Yo, I'm so glad that you was going to pause it right there because I want to talk about two things. Go ahead.
You know what I just thought about? What if the hype surrounding people climbing Mount Everest, there's really a portion of people who are kind of secretly going after the entrance to the Hollow Earth, in the sense that I always used to think what was, obviously it's considered the highest peak,
Right.
this thing that for you as a mountain climber is like the apex of what would be your mountain climbing experience, or your journey as far as that hobby of yours. But in a lot of ways, I mean, they talk about how many dead bodies are just riddled on, Mount Everest, from people attempting this feat. And so it makes me think that, not to say that there's some people who aren't as, who aren't diehard about getting to the top of this peak just for the sake of climbing, but now that they're speaking about it, I'm like,
how many of those expeditions were for other reasons, right?
Yeah, like, there's other people that they were willing to die for a whole different reason. They were like, yo, I'm gonna find this entrance or die trying. Like I'm going to the limits or die trying. This is the one access point that they're allowing people to actually physically get to. So hey, I'm gonna take my chances. So that's the first thing I thought about. Like, wow, I never even thought about it from that angle, but to me, that's an interesting perspective.
One thing that I also wanted to point out is those drawings of Shambhala really remind me of. I'm about to send it to you in the chat real quick. It reminds me of was it Plato? Plato's description of Atlantis.
Right.
I think that shouldn't be like missed, because those pictures that I'm seeing from the ancient Eastern religious texts, that looks eerily familiar to what I'm seeing could be, those drawings of Shambhala. So
but you know what's also interesting for me, and that's a great point that you make, and to speak on just the idea of repetition in a way, or imitation. It's kind of like the same thing with religion. It's kind of like when you're somebody who truly is analytical and you kind of study the different religions, you're like, man, these stories all sound the same, just different characters, right? It's like, okay, you have this one main guy in this religion, his name is this, and this religion, his name is this, but it's set up literally telling you the same stories.
A lot of overlap.
Yeah, a lot of overlap. So it's always, that's why I'm not necessarily a religious person, because I'm like, it's not that I don't find it useful in some way, but I'm just not a person who is gonna assign one religion and just say, hey, this is the end all be all. I feel like there's truth in the big picture of the story, the grand story that's being told. And I feel like this is all a part of the grand story. And I find it interesting that people really aren't interested in this kind of stuff. It's like you read these historical books, but there has to be some end goal in sight. Like there has to be somewhere you're going with it.
A goal, right?
What's the story? Like, what's the real story? It's like watching a movie with no ending. You're like, why did I just watch that? You know, like so there has to be an ending, you know, to this. You know, these people are these highly distinguished, you know,
paid
some could
paid
say
people,
wealthy
bro.
people.
5 years they were in the Himalayas. 5 years before FDR sent them back. You know, but what? You know what kind of resources you have to have access to be able to do that?
Look, but think about just reading between the lines of what they said in the beginning of the video. They disappeared the first expedition they went, right? And they just showed back up. Then Roosevelt says, hey, well, you didn't find anything? I'm going to send you
You're
back.
getting close? Word?
But really, when you think about it, to me, what I hear is you went the first time, you disappeared, you found it, and you came back, and basically it's a bargaining chip now. Like, hey, Roosevelt, you know, we might have saw some stuff. Just, you know, we're not gonna tell you.
Or like Admiral Byrd did. Here's a message. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Here's a message, and then here, you know, we need to send something back to them. We need to correspond with them again, so they're waiting for your message. So what do you want them to know? You know what I mean? Like
right.
That I think is totally possible, especially when you combine those two stories and like, you know, with Admiral Byrd, you know, being able to converse with them and he having a message, and then I absolutely believe that they came back with a message and something to say, man.
You know how dope it would have been. Like I'm gonna get back to the video right after this, but I envision a scene, you know, where the Roricks, they pull up to the White House. You know, they're having this, you know, in between the lines kind of conversation. Roosevelt's trying to figure out, like, you know, where you guys been? Like, what did you see? Did you see anything? Did you find anything? And they just pull something out their pocket and just sit it on the table. And when he picks it up, it's like something that, like, for that time period, it's just unworldly. He's like,
right.
Whoa. You know, it's almost like Pulp Fiction, like them open the suitcase and you just see the light. And you're like, what is that?
What
you know,
is
like,
that?
What is it? What is that in the suitcase? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's very interesting.
One more thing too. One more thing that
ahead.
I wanted to add to that would be I think this is so interesting that I think we should really understand that these are mystics that were sent. These weren't scientists. These weren't these weren't like, you know what I mean, like scholarly people. These weren't people that had all these kind of accolades. These were mystics, and these were people who were quote unquote uneducated according to, you know, the educational field. And I just really want to harp on the fact that there is so much to be learned outside of the scholastic arena about our existences, and there are people like this that really like get my excitement, because them, Madame Blavatsky, who I'm gonna talk about in our subsequent episodes, these people have access to a knowledge that was able to give them insight into things that you wouldn't be able to read or learn anywhere in academia. So shouts out to the mystics.
And that's a great point you make. But even with you saying that, they were still able to rise to a high level of society, even being mystics. So that to me, that still aids in what you're saying, is that today, though they would have been considered conspiracy theorists, spooks, and, you know, not spooks, but spooky, and you know, somewhat of like weirdos essentially. But even in that particular time period of history, they were actually elevated to high status.
They had status,
and I'm
amongst
sure
the people that mattered.
Right. And I'm sure you don't get that kind of status in that particular arena by just talking nonsense and gibberish. You know what I'm saying?
Like reading tarot cards.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying? Like they really had to be coming with a real idea for not only to be taken seriously, but to actually be funded by heads of state to say, hey, you think this inner earth exists? Here you go. Here's a check. Let's see.
And multiple nations, like you said, multiple nations that had spies in these areas, and all the spies were trying to figure out, you know, England was trying to figure out what America's doing, America's trying to figure out what France is doing. Like, these were all people that were heavily invested.
Bro, listen, bro. I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this real quick, and let's get back to it. I swear to you, and I think our Zoom is gonna time out. So we'll have to start it over. So I kind of want to